Very good evening everyone, and welcome to our special program on Ada Derana 24/7. We are going to talk about Buddhism, meditation and life in general, and how Buddhism can be effective in our lives to make it better. So I am here with a very special guest tonight, Venerable Olande Ananda Thera, who is the resident meditation teacher of the Pagoda Meditation Centre. Venerable Thera, welcome to our special program tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so now Venerable Thera, you were born in Amsterdam. Let's talk about your life before you were ordained as a Buddhist monk.
Well, if we have to go back 70 years, the year that I was born in 1948, it was just 3 years after the Second World War. Economic situation was not very good in Holland in those days, but my father worked himself up and became quite well off in importing and wholesaling of luxury articles, silver and crystal. I had a fairly good education, primary, secondary and also tertiary education. In the University of Amsterdam I studied economics and sociology, especially of developing countries. But at a certain point I felt not very happy with myself, with the world, with what I was doing, the studies, and I saw the world as if it was going down, down, down. Then I went searching and searching for something which could make myself happy, and I found in Hinduism a kind of yoga and mantra meditation, which is called transcendental meditation, where you just repeat a mantra and you feel your mind is becoming calm and peaceful and happy, quite quickly actually. And that was introduced by a yogi called Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who introduced this technique to the West, first through the Beatles. The famous Beatles started meditating, and I also started meditating. And quite a few people in Europe started meditating. There was not much else. There was hardly anything known about Buddhism, a little bit about Hinduism, but this particular transcendental meditation, TM, became quite popular. So after practicing that, somebody actually gave me a book to read, an American friend of mine, and he gave this autobiography of a yogi written by Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda from India, who lived in California most of his life. And when I read this, I thought, yes, now I really have to go to India to see what a developing country is like, and also to see whether I can find a disciple of Yogananda to teach me this Kriya Yoga, which is a new technique, different from the transcendental meditation, but still within the Hindu sphere, based on bhakti and Shraddha and Rama, Krishna, Vishnu, and basically the Hindu kind of pantheon. But it was a technique which one could practice also to develop both concentration and also to develop special powers such as clairvoyance, clairaudience and things like that. So I practiced that for some time after meeting a direct disciple of Yogananda's, a doctor from Bengal, from Calcutta, living in Ranchi, Bihar. And then that doctor initiated me into the technique of Kriya Yoga quite soon after I met him. He gave me the technique, and then I started practicing that, went back to Holland, and I got a letter from the doctor saying, would you like to come back and stay with me in the ashram and become a monk here, a Swami. That sounded like music to my ears. So at that time I still wasn't quite familiar with Buddhism. However, the family whom I met in India, who were actually Hindu, so they said, as Hindus, it was surprising, that Buddhism seems more suitable for me than Hinduism, even though they were Brahmins and Hindus. And yes, so they gave me a small Buddha statue. So in that way I started getting introduced to Buddhism through Hinduism. And then when I saw the quietude, the cleanliness and the peaceful look on the face of the Buddha, I got quite impressed by Buddhism. And I also started reading some books. And then I started traveling around India also to some Buddhist places. So slowly I got interested in Buddhism.
Okay, so how did Sri Lanka become your religious destination in that journey?
Yes, well, if you believe in predestination, I don't know, but it seems like a coincidence that I met a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk in the train going to Nepal, and the train went on strike. They said it's not going anywhere for some time, and this monk was sitting just close to me and smiled at me. And then he said, "What are you doing? Where are you going? What are your plans?" And so I said, "Well, I'm hoping to go to Nepal and come back with a new visa and become a Hindu monk here in Ranchi." So he said, "Well, next time when your visa expires, you don't need to go to Nepal. Why don't you try to go to Sri Lanka? Here are some useful addresses in Sri Lanka, like Vajirarama Bambalpitiya, Pagoda Meditation Centre, and 2 or 3 more addresses." So with that, I actually, after my visa expired in India, came to Sri Lanka, and I stumbled into meeting different people at Anuradhapura, for instance, who asked me to come to his house and stay there. Then a gentleman who was boarded there, the curator of the folk museum in those days, Mr. Gunasekara, he said, "My mother lives across the street from a very well-known or very learned monk, Olande Ananda Thera. I didn't know him at that time, of course, but then." And then he, the Venerable Thera, said, "Why don't you come and stay here?" I said, "I want to go and meditate at Kandubodi." He said, "You can always do that, but why don't you make this your headquarters so that you can get to know the monk's life and the temple life and also the society, the people, and read something, maybe meet learned monks, not only meditate." So I did like that. And second time that I went to Kandubodi for an extended period, a quiet, solitary meditation, while there was guidance from a special teacher who could speak English, very, I would say, psychic person who could read my mind at a long distance and knew exactly what was going on in me. When I wanted to see the teacher, tock, 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 somebody wants to see, the teacher wants to see you, somebody would come to my door. And then he knew exactly what I wanted to ask, basically. So I got great confidence in that teacher also, and in the technique and the experience that I had, that made me decide to become a Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka. Earlier I didn't know that it was possible, but Venerable Olande Ananda Thera told me, "If you like, you can become a Buddhist monk here, instead of a Hindu Swami in India." So I became a Buddhist monk in 21st of September 1975, almost 43 years next month.
Okay, so ever since you are in Sri Lanka, and then why do you think Sri Lanka is so special for you as a country again?
Yes, well, of course there are other Buddhist countries like Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, India, Nepal, and also if you look at the Mahayana countries, China and let's say places like Japan and Korea, Vietnam. I could have stayed in other places, but first of all, I like the people here, the climate, the atmosphere, which as a Buddhist monk is very conducive. The fact that I can get an extension on my visa here is another practical reason. In a lot of other countries it's not easy to stay for a long time. Plus the fact that I have become a vegetarian before I became a monk, and in the other countries which I mentioned, like Laos, Cambodia and Burma, Thailand, the monks are strictly non-vegetarian, 90% meat and fish. So I wouldn't be able to stay there. Actually, when I stayed there for 6 weeks, I became very thin and I got sick. So all these factors together, and probably also the fact that, what I can assume that I have been here in previous lives as well. It's amazing how I can memorize places in Sri Lanka much better than in Holland, for instance, and also remember the names of people. Vikramavira Surya, for instance, is not a big problem, but Mr. Piet Janssen, for instance, is difficult to remember. Yes, so in that way, I felt there must have been some connection here with Sri Lanka, more than other countries, even though Bhutan and Tibet are also on the list of countries where I may have been in previous lives.
Okay, Venerable Thera, we have so much to talk about, but before that we'll go in for a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Do stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We are in discussion with Venerable Olande Ananda Thera, who is the resident meditation teacher of Pagoda Meditation Centre. And Venerable Thera, now as we were talking about your life when you just became a monk and how your journey actually brought you to Sri Lanka, we were discussing about all of that. Before we go in to your interest in meditation, let's also talk about how you are very interested in Tibetan Buddhism as well.
Yes, Tibetan Buddhism. At first, I must say, when I encountered Tibetan Buddhism in Kathmandu, at the Swayambhuna temple on top of the hill, the monkey temple, there are a couple of Tibetan centers around there, and when you hear the pujas, they seemed very eerie and otherworldly and difficult to understand, actually, with all the clinging, crashing of the cymbals and the horns that they play and the very deep, sonorous chanting and all that. But slowly, later on, when I did visit several Tibetan places, Tibet itself twice, and also Ladakh 10 times, and Mongolia twice, and Bhutan twice, and Sikkim many times, several times, so, and Nepal itself also again and again, then it grew on me. And I started appreciating Tibetan Buddhism. I actually got to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama several times. Also in meeting the first time in 1993, March, in Dharamsala, of a network of Western Buddhist teachers, for which I was invited by Western Lama from New York State. And then, of course, the contact with His Holiness the Dalai Lama also helped to understand more of the spirit of Tibetan Buddhism. But even otherwise, traveling in those areas, the Himalayan area basically, actually made me feel very much at home with those friendly people. You see, Tibetan, of course, I don't know the language, I don't understand the texts which they chant, but the way that people are living and the way that monks also are interacting with each other and also towards me was very, very friendly. And so the ideal of the Tibetan Buddhism, which is called Vajrayana, the diamond way, which they say is even a step higher than Mahayana, the great way, as opposed to the Hinayana or the lesser vehicle. Well, that term is not used anymore nowadays. It's just Theravada or original Buddhism or Southern Buddhism, which we practice. They say that the ideal to become an Arhat is one thing, but the ideal of wanting to be a Bodhisattva and developing your paramitas until you can reach Buddhahood eventually, and in the meantime do a lot for other people, is less selfish, more altruistic. So in that sense, I do think that they do have a point there. On the other hand, I think that's also the reason why I stuck with Theravada Buddhism. Not that I'm too much attached to it, I think, but in Theravada Buddhism we have Tuntara Bodhying Nivanda Kila. That means you can choose whether you want to follow Buddha and become an Arhat, or you can tried to be a Pacceka Buddha, a silent or solitary Buddha at a time when there's no Buddha or Buddha's teachings around. Or you can try to be a Bodhisattva and become a Buddha in a long distant future, which is a very long and arduous path. So some people say that is an impracticable proposition, to wait for everybody else, to postpone your own enlightenment till all beings can be enlightened, which probably will never happen. So I thought, let me stay with Theravada Buddhism. It's quite practical. It's more simple. Tibetan Buddhism is very full of rituals and chanting, prostrations, visualizations, and so many mantras that you have to chant, 100,000 mantras, 100,000 prostrations, and many visualizations, and different deities, different Dharma protectors, and different Buddhas also, female, male, and so on. So it is quite complex, not easy to understand.
Okay. And Venerable Thera, also let's talk about now your journey in meditation, how you became a teacher for students who are interested in meditation and your interest with it.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned earlier, that I was unhappy with myself, unhappy with the world, unhappy with what I was doing, and I needed something to make me personally happy. So I started a TM, Transcendental Meditation, and I found, wow, this is really very good. Very fast, I found that something happens within me. I see things more positively, I see the colors more bright, I see the dimensions better, and I was practicing that for about a year and a half when I came to this other form, that is after reading the autobiography of a yogi and then starting to practice that particular form of meditation, which is called Kriya Yoga, which is a kind of a breathing technique, pranayama, and kind of concentration of the eyes onto the third eye, and mantra chanting, loud and then softly within also, and together with a belief in the existence of God, basically in the form of Vishnu and his incarnations like Krishna, Rama, Krishna, and Buddha is also considered to be one of the 10 incarnations of Vishnu, but seen as a kind of a deity, not as a human being as such. Although they do realize he's a human being, but as if he's coming from a holy or from a deity instead of just from his own reincarnation, basically. So that kind of development from one type of Hindu meditation to the other, and then later on at Pagoda Meditation, I started practicing Vipassana meditation or Satipatthana, mindfulness meditation. And there I found that there's nobody there to talk to, no God, no teacher, well, sometimes the teacher, but not in the meditation. You have to do it yourself. You are solely dependent on yourself, but it gives a way to solve whatever problem there is by looking at it clearly, and then you see it disappearing in front of your own eyes. So that discovery during my second stay in Pagoda sparked the decision to actually become a Buddhist monk and to practice Vipassana meditation, Satipatthana Bhavana. And I've stayed with that. The first 4 years I used to go from time to time to meditation center like Pagoda or another place in the mountains. And later on I actually shifted to that place in the mountains near Gampule called Vegerikande International Meditation Center. Now there I became the meditation teacher because an American monk who was there before me, he left for California, and there was a gap, there was a vacancy, so to speak. And I jumped into the vacancy. Very good climate near Gampule, and also a regular stream of tourists who started coming for the meditation courses, which I started to organize basically from the 1st to the 11th every month. there was a course. 18 to 20 people started coming, usually half of them from Germany, as tourism to Sri Lanka was those days 50% from Germany. Now 50% from China, I suppose, but those days more German and also Australian here and there. So I did that for 5 years, from the 1st till the 11th of every month at Vegerikande or Rock Hill Hermitage, and I became a meditation teacher, and perhaps a little bit more and more known. Then when I moved from there because of certain reasons, and I went actually first abroad to England and then came back, shifted to an Aranya forest hermitage in the south of Sri Lanka between Galle and Udugama called Kottava Nagaranya. Kottava Nagaranya was a 63-acre, part of a 1,000-acre forest, rainforest, an old hermitage, but it was neglected. The old monk there was 90 years old, and they asked me if I could look after the place. I started, organizing the Dana Leistua and repairing the kutis, and then I did not organize any meditation courses, but I was meditating myself, and sometimes we had visitors. And on Poya days we had programs, including meditation and Dhammadesana for the local Buddhist people.
Now, Venerable Thera, do you see Sri Lankans coming to you more often than foreigners? Given the fact that Sri Lanka itself is a Buddhist country, do you think we as a general public, are we very inclined towards meditating or very inclined towards Buddhism as such? Do you believe that?
Well, it is growing, I think, the interest in meditation among the Sri Lankans. In the earlier days, like the 50s, 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there was hardly any interest in meditation, hardly any interest. But since 1954, when Kandu Bodha was started, and the possibility was shown that also lay people can go for meditation retreats, little by little people started going and meditating there. Now, I conduct every week at the Buddhist Cultural Centre at Tulmula Junction on Mondays a meditation class, which is attended by, an average of 25 people, generally speaking. Ladies, gentlemen, young and medium and elderly. Sometimes a foreigner or two. These days there's a Japanese gentleman and then another person from different countries. Sometimes they happen to hear about it. In those days when I was at Vegerikande near Gampala, we advertised it in a little brochure at the Buddhist Publication Society near the Vevaroma at the end of the lake at Kandy. So people got to know about it. Here, if people are just visiting Sri Lanka without knowing about it, they may not know that every Monday there's a meditation. It's not mentioned, I think, in a tourist magazine. But the Sri Lankan people, as you asked, yes, I think more and more people are actually realizing that the old form of Buddhism, which is more like cultural and, kind of ritualistic, not with much wisdom perhaps or knowledge about the Dhamma, is not enough. So they do study Dhamma more and more. They go for retreats also, not only to the simple retreats that I give only 2 hours in a week at Tulmula Junction. Once in a month, at the third Saturday, I also give at Mettarame in Bambalpitia meditation in the afternoon, 4:30 to 6. And there are several other teachers of meditation, male and female, monks and lay people, who are now teaching meditation in Sri Lanka. I think the interest is still growing.
Venerable Thera, now there's an autobiography about your life and your journey. So let's talk a bit about that as well.
Yes. Well, it's an autobiography which was co-written by D.C. Ranatunga, who lives in Australia, sometimes in Perth, sometimes in Sydney, with his daughters. He's pendling up and down. He was with Lake House as a journalist for quite some time, and we discussed over the internet through Skype my life from beginning till now, and he interviewed me. So through that he was actually recording that on his mobile phone and then typing it out into chapters, and it became a book. Half of it is pictures and half of it is simple English account of my life.
All right, Venerable Thera, it was an honor to actually do this discussion with you, and thank you very much for joining with us tonight, and thank you all for joining with us tonight. It was Venerable Olande Ananda Thera, who is the resident meditation teacher of Pagoda Meditation Centre, who was in discussion with us tonight. So thank you very much for listening to us. Have a very pleasant evening.